For this session, we're going to focus on this question: how do I actively read through resources? And I'm going to give you a tool to do that, and that's called using thinking codes. When you read, you should actively interact with the resource that you're using. How do you do that? How do you activate your thinking? Mark it up as you read it. And so here are some symbols that we're going to use to mark up our thinking. Just like an animal leaves tracks in the snow, you can follow its path, its physical movement. When you look at resources that you have marked, you can actually follow your path of thinking through them, and they'll become much more useful when you go back to use them for your final product. The resource we're going to look at is going to be this article right here, Top 5 Causes of the Civil War. Sounds like a good hit given our focus. And again, when we read, we're going to read with a purpose. Our purpose is to stick with our focus question: what are the causes of the Civil War? And to try to answer that with the resource we have. There are 5 listed here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, and I've already done this, copy and paste this into a Word document so that I can then mark up my thinking. And as you can see here, I did mark my thinking through this article, and I actually bolded it at the same time. If you didn't have a Word doc and you were looking at a piece of paper, it's oftentimes better to do your marking in the columns here, either margin right or left, so that you can see it more easily. When you go down, you can see down this left side here all your thinking, and then refer to it within the text itself, maybe with a highlighter or something. But be careful not to over-highlight, over-mark. Just simply mark down, according to these things here, something I know, something I've learned, a question, something that confuses me, something that seems important, for something exciting or surprising, and something that kind of reminds you of something that you can make a connection to perhaps another resource. So as I read here, I read first of all the population of the casualties in the Civil War were about 618,000. I knew that, so I just kind of marked that as a check. It's not really relevant to our cause of the Civil War though, so it may be not even necessary to mark that at all. As we go down here further, in 1793, the cotton gin by Eli Whitney, that invention made cotton very profitable. If I didn't know that, maybe that would be something important to learn. And why is that important to learn? What's the connection? Well, it caused the South to become a one-crop economy, and it was dependent on slavery. So this cotton gin made more need for slaves, made the South dependent on cotton and slavery, and there's a social economic consequence there. Your livelihood depends on cotton, which depends on slave labor, according to how Southerners saw this institution. As we continue reading down here, the term antiquated, let's say that caused confusion for me. I'm going to mark 2 question marks, and I can go back and maybe look that up. What does antiquated mean? Second cause here, and actually I'd probably start by reading the numbers here of the causes: economics, state versus federal rights, the fight between slaves and non-slaves, growth of the abolition movement, and the election of Abraham Lincoln. If any of these causes are not in my topic sheet, I would put them down under my resources, under my key terms, so I can add to them. In fact, the term nullification is a word that I hadn't perhaps seen before. I would add that to my key terms to look up further. Where's nullification? Right down here, and I mark it with a double question mark. So I continue reading. I see here, excuse me, since the time of the Revolution, 2 camps emerged: those arguing for greater states' rights, and those arguing that the federal government needed to have more control. That seems very important. I marked it with a star. It also kind of makes me think about recently the Obamacare bill and the argument over is that an intrusion of federal government? The federal government is the national government over states' rights. Is the government getting too big? So is this a question today, the fight over Obamacare, that the philosophy involved here, the different levels of thinking, also were what split people with the Civil War? Now, again, the topic was different. The argument we've seen before was slavery, but still this concept of the state's power versus the national government power is an important one potentially. There's all kinds of possible terms in here, but again, I caution you, make sure these terms relate directly to what caused the Civil War. We don't want to get off track. Thomas Jefferson was long dead by the time of the Civil War, as was Patrick Henry. The fight between slave and non-slave proponents. As we read through here, there's a number of terms that could be have some relevance to us, and I seem to see a split here between slave and non-slave states. So again, pretty important concept. Seems to be a common theme of who stayed, who went, although there were some states that had slavery that did not split from the Union. So that might be some interesting things to look at later. As we continue reading, if you'll notice down here, the growth of the abolition movement, that term we've had before, it's already marked here. And there's a number of people that are listed here that I starred. Harriet Beecher Stowe, her book Uncle Tom's Cabin, the Dred Scott case. What is the Dred Scott case? I put a question mark. John Brown's raid, passage of the Fugitive Slave Act. So I'm going to add Harriet Beecher, and I'm going to add Uncle Tom's Cabin, and I'm going to add Dred Scott. To our key terms, and Harriet Beecher and Dred Scott are two people down here under the who's that we should be looking at. So I should put her last name here. Continue to read the election of Abraham Lincoln. So maybe I'd even make that a key term itself, not just Abraham Lincoln, but the election of Abraham Lincoln. What is it about that that could relate to the causes of the Civil War? And notice here it mentions South Carolina issued its Declaration of Causes of Secession. I remember that. I know that's important. I want to go back to that and see what they said if I haven't done that already. And they believed that Lincoln was anti-slavery and in favor of Northern interests. Before Lincoln even was president, 7 states had seceded from the Union. Wow, that's startling, surprising. I mark that as such. Maybe I'd come back and revisit that. So again, what did we do? We took our resource, we marked it up with our thinking so that we're actively reading it as we go through. It's an excellent comprehension strategy. For every resource we have, we should do these very same things. And we're going to practice that with several things, and I'm going to have you also do that with your own resources so we can see how you did.